Hey, it's Charlie again, and today we're going to speak about incorrect isms. Now, before I do, I'd like to introduce you to Zacchaeus. I call him Zacchaeus Goodboy, and he's wearing his Fonzie jacket just for you, looking pretty handsome. I don't know if you can see that. And you may notice that I also am wearing some long johns. It's 62 degrees in Florida right now, and that's pretty cold. So I apologize about that. Before I get started on incorrect isms, I'd like to read you something that I typed up which parallels a passage from Isaiah 44. This is a man speaking to himself, and he says, "I cut down a tree and used some of it to boil my coffee. The fire made me warm, too. With the rest of the wood, I made an idol. I fashioned it with my hands. Now I bow down to it and worship it. I say, 'Save me. You are my God.'" Now, obviously, this is rather insane, but people do it all the time. All around the world, people are bowing down to stones and wood and trees and any part of the created order they can, rather than seeking out the Creator. And if you think you haven't done it, I mean, we all have. We've all set up an idol in our heart. It may be women, it may be money, it may be a car, but we let things divert our attention away from God. And if anything steals our joy, then it was probably an idol. We get our car crashed and, oh, my joy is gone. Well, if that's where your joy is resting, then it is an idol. And we need to be careful about that. We're never to bow down to any part of the created order. We're to reverence the God who created us. Concerning the nature of God, the different isms that we're going to talk about, there are many. We'll talk about 4 or 5 of them, and that's it. The first one that I'd like to bring to mind, as we've already talked about, is atheism. Atheism is a belief that there is no God. Theos, no God. Okay? It's an incorrect system of religion, and it's also the idea of a fool. And we've already discussed why. It's because in order to say there's no God, you'd need to be infinitely knowledgeable on the subject of God, and you'd need to claim basically that you're God. Then you'd be denying yourself, or you'd be making a claim which was insufficient with the knowledge you have, and once again, either way you're a fool. So atheism is not a possibility, and it is an incorrect system of belief. The next one that I'd like to talk to you about is polytheism. Polytheism is a belief that there are many gods. You got a God here, got a God here, one created this part of the universe, and one did this, and one did that. Now, in order for that to be true, one God would need to differ from another God. You understand that? You got a God here and you got a God here. This one must have something that this doesn't have, or it would be the same God. So in order to differ from one from another, they could not have created ex nihilo. As we talked about earlier, ex nihilo is creation out of nothing. In addition to that, they would lack something. One would lack something that the other had. They could not be the God of the universe. It's impossible. You can't have one God that lacks something else that another God has and be called God. They're not gods at all. They come from our imagination, and they're incorrect in that respect. Now, before I go on about polytheism, I'd like to tell you that people say, secular scholars will argue that religious belief started with something like animism, which is a belief in Africa. And from there, it evolved slowly, and it got up to a few gods, and then fewer gods and fewer gods, and eventually it evolved into monotheism. I can assure you, and you can study this out if you're willing to spend the time, that that is 100% the opposite of the way that religion has gone. It has actually devolved from a belief in one God into a belief in many gods. So don't even consider that if you haven't heard it, and if you have heard it and it's stuck in your brain, go research it out. The original belief in mankind was one God, and monotheism is the original religion, and things have devolved, not evolved to that, but devolved from that. The notion of one God has always been maintained in society in one form or another, but that's the way that it went, so don't be misled by that. As I said, because one being has something that another being doesn't have in polytheism, they could not have created ex nihilo. That's just simply not possible. In addition to that, one contingent being, a being that could not be, cannot create another contingent being. That's not possible. So, if something creates another being, then it must be a necessary being. There's no intermediary steps. There's no God created this being, which now creates other beings. There is one God that created all other beings. Contingent beings cannot create other contingent beings. So keep that in mind. Therefore, anything that comes to be must have been caused by a necessary being, and polytheism is incorrect. All right? So just understand that polytheism is not a valid ism. The next one we'll talk about is pantheism. All is God. And there's a lot of nutty notions about that around the world that, oh, I become God. This one lady, I don't want to give her name, but she teaches that God is in us, the inner Christ and all that kind of stuff, and that we become God. And that's just simply not correct. That's impossible for a number of reasons. First, it denies the reality of limited and finite beings, which I'm a limited and finite being. Okay? I'm real. I know I'm real. We talked about how you can know reality before. All is God denies that possibility. Experience shows that Charlie, a finite being, is changing. I'm getting a gray beard. I'm getting wrinkles on my face. My wife in the other room is getting more beautiful every day. So there is change in finite beings. Okay? Real change indicates a separation distinct from a creator God. We cannot be the creator God if we have change in us. We've already discussed that God created time, space, and matter. There's no change in God, and therefore any change in us indicates that we just simply cannot be God. This also would proclaim pantheism, that God created ex deo, out of himself. Okay, now if that's the case, then the matter in God always existed. And we've already confirmed that time, space, and matter, based on relativity, general theory of relativity, they all came into existence at the same time. If there was always matter, then there is an infinite regress of time, and that's impossible. God did not create ex deo, out of himself. He created ex nihilo, out of nothing. So I'll put that to rest. And the very nature of pantheism is self-refuting, because it claims that individuality is merely an illusion of our minds. Okay? If this were true, then pantheism must be false, because there is no mind to explain the illusion. It's a self-defeating system. You've got no mind to explain. It must be a mind. You see what I'm saying? So it's a self-refuting system. In essence, pantheism is incorrect.